What's up, everyone? Thank you for tuning in. So recently I've seen on the 3G's Facebook page, as well as me receiving numerous emails and DMs in my Instagram, of a repetitive question of basically, hey, how do we build this third generation Accord? What performance parts do you use? What suspension parts can we use? How do you do this? How do you do that? And even though I've made numerous videos that went in great detail and talking about all this stuff, and as well as the 3G's forums being around for many, many years, I feel that a lot of these people asking this question don't know what they're getting themselves into, or they're planning on getting this car, and basically they feel like they can approach this car as they would, the Civic or the Integra chassis, which has a lot broader aftermarket support than this car does. Now, I'm not telling you to not, build this car in any way that you want. I'm not, deferring you, but I'm just kind of hopefully telling you right now, if you really want to build a race car out of this chassis, it will be a lot easier in time, possibly even money, to acquire a Civic or an Integra than doing this to this car. Unless you're willing to take the time to dive into the knowledge. And like, if you watch my videos, you subscribe to my channel, thank you very much. There's a lot of great detail that I cover that I feel would help a lot of beginners in this chassis. But the holy grail really is in the 3G's forums, and I get it. The forums, some of these threads and stuff is pretty ancient, but I mean, there's a lot of it still holds true until this day. Like, I still find posts and articles that I haven't come across ever. So keep that in mind. So right now in this video, I'm going to cover basically, like, it's 2020, well, end of 2020. What can we do to this car? Alright, so I'm going to start off with you guys that are planning on just doing like a stock rebuild, just keeping it maintained. And anyone that's not desiring to make a race car or a show car or anything out of this chassis. So, rebuilding the 820, doing a full overhaul for the engine and even the transmission itself, honestly, you're only looking to spend a couple $100, especially if you're doing it yourself. Now, if you're going to have a shop do it, yeah, and you're going to start, seeing a price spike in that. But overall, like, doing a complete overhaul on this engine, unless it really needs to, these engines are pretty stout. Like, these are definitely 500,000 mile plus engines if well maintained. Now, like, there has been a 1,000,000 mile Accord before, stock everything, and it's been well maintained. That's been cataloged. But yeah, it's definitely doable. Now, if you want to do this just for the peace of mind of it, like I'm saying, like, if you're going to be doing all of it, it'll probably be like about $500, maybe less. I mean, that's like including transmission and stuff too. Probably a couple $100 for the engine, but I mean, like, so for example, on my 87 hatchback carbureted and my 88 coupe LXI fuel injected, combined, they have about 600,000 miles on engine and transmission. Now, if you've been following my channel, you probably know that I blew the head gasket on the LXI coupe. Now, that head gasket blew while after I did the OBD1 conversion, and I was driving it on a B18 non-VTEC base map. So that possibly could have had a contributing factor. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it could have blown too on a stock, OBD0 stock Accord base map. So, but just adding some context in there for anyone kind of like questioning that based upon that previous video. So yeah, it's definitely doable. Even like, you can still find rebuild kits for the transmissions. Come with like all the seals, bearings, synchros, all that good stuff for about roughly $200 on eBay, depending where you find. And those kits, like, they're good. I've seen members use them with not having any bad experience with it. So OEM guys, you're safe as far as like engine rebuilds or transmission rebuilds. Now, if you're going to be talking about like exterior, interior stuff, like the little things, that can get a little bit more trickier. Just basically be able to find it. Like, your easiest bet is going to be junkyard. Now, I'm going to say this: if you have like a catastrophic, situation where like your interior is just trash, or you just got in a collision, or the car, the exterior is all trashed up, and you want to find replacement parts, or maybe a whole new chassis, in general, then honestly, it will probably be cheaper and easier in the long run finding another Accord that has better qualities in a certain field than what yours is lacking in. So for example, if you find one where it's been in a collision but the interior is flawless, you may be able to pick it up for a couple $100 and you just take everything you need from it. Or, in other cases, maybe like no title or this and that, or like, you never know. I've seen so many crazy deals throughout the past that like you'll always find. I've always found one Accord that like triumphed in one field than the other. That's just the way it is. I mean, that's most cars, but just kind of keep that in consideration before like if you make a list of things you're planning on replacing or rebuilding or whatever. Try to add that up and see like, should I go and buy a whole new interior set or new upholstery or whole front end, or should I just use this money and maybe spend $100 or two and just get a whole car? So something to consider. All right, so moving on with the first build recommendation that I have to offer. So everything in this video is my opinion, and this is based upon my experiences, my knowledge from other members with their them sharing their experiences, seeing what they have to go through or stuff that they've documented or cataloged. So there's that. So my personal opinion on the easiest build to do on a 3Gs would be basically a show car or a stance build. Throw some good suspension on there, throw some aftermarket wheels, cool paint job or vinyl wrap or whatever. Clean interior, stereo system, whatever you want to do to make you happy, and call it good. And the cool thing about all this stuff too is like everyone has their own preference and their own taste in like builds and style, kind of like in music. So like I'm not gonna like criticize you too much on what you choose to do, but all I'm gonna say, like, if you build something and you can go back every day and look at it for the first time and it puts a big old smile on your face, then by all means do it. The only time I'll probably more than likely criticize you for whatever you're doing is if you're doing something that I feel is like extremely dangerous to yourself or extremely dangerous to any others driving around you. Other than that, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. So yeah, the reason why I say stance build is, there's thankfully multiple aftermarket suspension parts out there, and all the ones made for our cars are all good quality ones, because the cheapest one's probably about $700 or $800, yellow speed. Everything other than that's going to be up to about $1,000, if not more. Airbag kits are available for our chassis. I think K-Sport's the company that has that. And then you can lower it, you can raise it, do whatever whatever you want to do. Wheels and tires, throw whatever flavor you want on there. If you want to go as cheap as like XXRs, not knocking XXRs, just putting it out there, or go as high as like Vogue T37s or like some BBSs, rebarreled with some crazy negative offset, some crazy stance or whatever. I'm not a big fan of negative camber, like spaceship cars. I'm not a big fan, but if that's what you want to do, that's totally doable. And I actually know how to make these cars have crazy camber, but I'm not going to say it. So, yeah, there's that. And as far as interior goes, like, the sky's the limit. Body kits, nobody's making body kits for this car right now. My favorite is the Xenon kit, if you can even find those. Caminari makes good ones as well. But kind of like what I did with the front lip and my rear ducktail wing, like explore. Don't just stick with Honda stuff. Like, try to do hybrid stuff. Look at other chassis, see what works. I've measured, I've gone on forums for like S chassis, like the 240SX groups, just to find out what's the diameter, what's the specs on the rear trunk on the coupe, on the S13 coupe, and that's how I figured out. I made a decision to get the Rocket Bunny replica ducktail wing, and it works perfectly. I had to do one modification, which was just to cut the bottom part of it, which covers up our license plate, and boom, it worked out. I like it. Some other people like it. Some people you may not, but hey, that's cool. The front lip on my car is from a 2003 Mitsubishi Lancer. It's the lower part of that front bumper. Is it perfect? No, but it looks cool, and it's close to fitting. So yeah, don't be afraid to explore. Even for like fender flares or over fenders and stuff like that, check them out. Get some measurements, hit up people from other groups or whatever. Like, hey, I'm planning on doing this and that. You never know. You might do. I've seen some crazy stuff, interior stuff. Mess around with seats, make your own seat rail. I've seen people put 300ZX seats in our cars. I've actually people have done the second generation Prelude seats. I've put fourth generation Prelude seats in my 96 EK Civic. So, is it perfect? No, but with enough time, enough dimensions, enough thinking and figuring it out, and doing the work, you can make pretty much anything work. I even considered putting RSX seats in the Accord before, but I just didn't like the way they felt. So keep have an open mind about all this stuff when it comes to building stuff. That's my 2 cents on that. Alright, so moving on to performance builds. Now I'm going to start off with the basic street, and it sounds funny I said basic street build. Now basic street build for me is intake, header, exhaust, and the ability to tune, and I'm even going to throw in a camshaft in there. And I'll explain why here in a second. Now, I recommend this to anybody planning to get real serious. Like if they're going to do a performance build, and I wish I did this, and I wish I'd known this at the beginning. This goes for anything, A series, D series, B series, K series, all that stuff. If you're going to be serious about doing a performance build on an engine, have the ability to tune the thing first. Like there's very few engine platforms that I know from factory that respond like night and day dramatically to bolt-ons with no tune. Like very few. And I can't even really name one off the top of my head. And that's the thing, I've heard people claim night and day results, but it's placebo or what? I don't know. So for this car will not respond to bolt-ons whatsoever. I promise you. It's more likely, if I'm willing to put money on it, it's going to be a placebo effect. You really want a quick, okay, how about this? You want your car to feel quicker? Do this. Get first generation Integra gears from the transmission. Get those gears, drop it in your transmission, and have shorter gears, along with the final drive. So the Integra, first generation Integra gears, the single cam ZC, put all that in your Cord A series trans and final drive, slap it back on the engine, drive it fully stock, you will notice a difference. If you want to feel quicker, that's the best way of doing it. You don't even need to tune the car. Okay, moving on from that. If you really want a performance built out of the engine, the first thing I recommend is have the ability to tune and then get it tuned. So that's going to require the OBD1 conversion. Now, I made a video on this that goes in great detail what's needed. So do that first. I wish I knew about this. I wish I did this. It would have saved me a lot of time and money, and probably, I probably would have been, gone a lot further on in my build if I were to went about it that route. So OBD1 conversion first. Find a reputable tuner. Tune the thing. Yeah, tune it stock. Figure out what needs to be fixed, what's acting weird first before you start throwing stuff on it, and then you got to start even figuring out more what needs to be fixed and what needs, what gave it power, what didn't give it power. So after that, then get your intake, get your cold air intake, whatever. If you are, I recommend a 9093 Integra, DA Integra cold air intake. You can run a cold air intake, but obviously if you haven't relocated your battery, you more likely can't. So then you have extra piping. Cut it to a certain length, whatever you want to. If you get an eBay or a cheap Amazon Chinese-made one, those piping is fine. Just get rid of that filter, throw on a quality K&N or anything of equal value. For intake manifolds, I've covered this before. A modified B16 or B18 non-VTEC intake manifold will bolt onto an 820 if modified correctly. Now, when you do that, you're also going to need the accompanying accessories. So map sensor, TPS sensor, throttle body, throttle cable bracket, the fuel rail, fuel pressure regulator. So if the 820 injectors will fit and work on this intake manifold. Now, if you do choose to use B series, keep in mind low impedance, high impedance. One's going to use a resistor box, one will not. And then after that, headers, there is no company that makes headers right now for the Accord. If you're going to find aftermarket headers, you're more likely going to have to find it used by someone on the internet somewhere or locally if you know any other Accord A20 guys. But a lot of those aftermarket headers really didn't work except for the DC one, but the DC ones are like the unicorn of all headers that were made for this car. Now, the best way to go about headers on this car if you're planning on doing an NA build, which will be custom headers, no questions about it. If you want an upgraded header, I recommend the OEM A Series 421 header. If you have the 401 design, try to get the 421 design. It responds and acts a lot better. Is it like night and day performance wise? No, but it'll definitely give a better power, through more of a usable power band that you're more likely going to be using it for. And then for exhaust, for like catback systems or whatever, so on my hatchback, I used a 2 1/4 inch exhaust piping. Worked out well. I mean, I really noticed a difference, but you know, I'm sure it's doing something way better than from the 1 3/4 inch that these cars come with stock. So if I was to do it all over again, I would go 2 1/2 inch, especially if I was going to be NA for a while. Build it yourself. From what I've heard, 4th generation Accord catback exhaust systems do work with slight modifications. I don't know exactly what needs to be done, but I've heard those work. So the 4th generation Accord. But just sort out some piping, find somebody to weld it up for you. It'd be a lot cheaper in the long run, unless whoever's welding it for you charges an arm and a leg, then whatever. Let's see here. If you're going to go turbo route and you don't want to spend any money on the exhaust system, then that's fine. If you're going to go turbo, at least 3-inch exhaust piping, if not more. Now, this sounds kind of weird that I'm going to be throwing in this for like just the street build, but a cam. I recommend Delta camshafts. They've made numerous grinds for the 820 platform before. I have a 272 grinded camshaft. Other members have gotten 272 before. You can also get like 282 and other weird stuff. Just if you don't know what to get as far as like cams go, contact Delta and tell them what your build is, tell them what your goals are, and they could probably recommend one for you. 272 at the end overall will give you a higher duration, so like you will see more power band up in like the higher RPM range where these engines start to struggle down. So we pretty much top out around 5,500 RPMs when stuff starts dying off. I mean, in general, I mean, it really depends on the condition of your engine when this happens and if you're on a dyno and whatnot. So going Delta 272 really isn't a bad idea. Now, this is optional. If you're going to go forced induction, if you plan on going turbo route, then camshaft, in my opinion, really isn't necessary. Alright, so next step would be like a more intermediate build. That's everything that I mentioned above in the street build. Plus now we're starting to attack the transmission. Now the transmission, as far as once we start adding a lot more power, the transmission is the weakest part of the whole A-series thing. Pretty much the diff pin is like glass. You do a lot of hard launches, you know, or anything like that, that diff pin will snap and will not last long at all. There is a somewhat of a solution for it. 2 solutions really. If you want to stick A-series everything with the A-series transmission, dropping in a B16 LSD transmission will work in the 820 transmission. There's some slight modifications you might have to do, maybe grinding away some material to make it fit right, but it will work. It has worked. Members have done it. I'll leave the part number in the description below. That is the best bet of having a strong, that is like the biggest key in strengthening an A-series transmission, along with, you know, your basic rebuild. So like, you know, synchros, your bearings, your seals, all that stuff. Throw out bearings, or out bearing, and D-series synchros will work too. There was a member who also used a Synchrotech D-series carbon synchros in an A-series before and worked out well. So I mean, you don't have to do that, but I mean, if you're gonna be spending that much money on an LSD, you might as well do that. Now, the ultimate way of remedying transmission problems for this is to throw a B-series transmission on this. Now, here's the problem. A to B has been in talks and has been in plans for many years. And the person that's been really on die hard on this project, like, it's just been one thing after another. The one thing all I'll say is right now is the plate, the adapter plate has been made. It has been test fitted and things are looking good. But right now things are at a standstill right now for unfortunate reasons. But I'm gonna keep that at that. So gearing too. Even if you're going to go forced induction, I would still go with a shorter gearing than you would, especially if you're carbureted. So I've talked about this before too. The most desired gearing to get is out of the 1st generation Integra single cam ZC. Get those gears and final drive, put them in your A-series transmission. The half case of that transmission from the Integra will bolt up to the A-series Accord bell housing. It'll work. If you can't find an Integra, the next best thing will be the Prelude A-series transmission gears. Those would be the next shortest. So that's the next step that I would recommend. Other than that, for a part of the intermediate build, now this is like, intermediate build for me is like semi-race. So it's like, it looks like a race car, it's fat, it's quicker than stock, but you're still getting your groceries in it, or maybe you're putting in the seats to haul your kids around or your family around. I don't know, whatever. But some other things considered too would be like weight reduction. So like maybe you take the rear seats out or whatever, take the speakers out. Aftermarket wheels, lighter wheels, maybe some stickier tires, like some Neogens, for example, and then possibly now getting into some suspension stuff, like getting some coilover, some yellow speeds or whatnot. All right, and lastly, race car build. Now, a full race car build for me, if I was going to do it, if I made the 100% decision to make this Accord and the A20 a race car, this is how I go about it. Take the engine out of the car, tear it down, inspect it, rebuild it. Car, go through it, see whatever is there that you need or don't need, get rid of it, fully gut the car, or just gut to whatever you can. Use leg sand windows. Again, I'm gonna keep this in mind. It all depends on the type of racing you are doing. If you're doing drag racing, if you're doing autocross, if you're doing road racing, time attack, SCCA type stuff, NASA type stuff, read the rules, look at stuff. Like before you start turning into this stuff, look at the class that you can fall into or that you want to fall into before you start tearing this car apart. You don't want to be doing stuff that what you think would be beneficial to come to find out that you're breaking a whole bunch of rules in the rule book for whatever you're trying to get into. So keep all that stuff in mind. Yeah, so if you're going to go full out, I said, gutted, get rid of the stuff you don't need, sound ending and stuff like that. Reinforce the structural rigidity of the whole chassis and stuff like that. Replace bushings, go through the whole car as you would be going through the engine itself. Now for the engine, if you're going to be doing a full out A20 build, the best bet would be taking it to a machine shop, have it bored and honed out to 84 millimeters, which is B20 CRV sized bore. Drop in forged pistons and rods. Use B18 non-VTEC length rods in this. Obviously accompanied with like ARP rod bowls. You should be using ARP hardware by now anyway. Get the crank balanced or blueprinted, whatever if you want to. Replace the oil pump or whatnot. I've never heard of a failing oil pump on these cars, but again, it doesn't hurt. Yeah, and then all the gaskets and seals that you need to on the block, and you should be good to go. But yeah, be forged. So for example, like a good set that I would recommend would be like Nippon Racing 84 millimeter Nippon Racing pistons to like B18 LS, like Eagle H-beam rods or like Scat H-beam rods, something like that for that nature. And then just, get your bearings, get your clearances, make sure everything's good. If you're not confident enough, find an engine builder, have them do it. And then as far as the head goes, these heads aren't like the best flowing heads. You could port and polish it to get better airflow. It won't hurt if it's done right and if you know what you're doing, or if you have, machine shop know what they're doing. The valve train in itself isn't really that much of a weak valve train. It'll handle some power. There really wasn't that many aftermarket parts made for it. I mean, the only thing I can think of is the BC Moto made a titanium valve springs for this at one point in time. You may be able to still get some if you contact them. If I remember correctly, they were rated to like 18,000 RPMs, but the 820 in itself isn't really a high revving motor. Now, your tuner will be able to tell you where to rev this car to, because you'll be able to tell where it starts making peak power, where it starts dropping off, so on and so forth. So you shouldn't be revving this thing to the moon unless you're tuner and engine builder, or if you have experience, and you should know. Tells you to. Let's see. Other than that, little stuff here and there, just reinforce, just more power, more heat, this and that, like, get, better radiator, just better supporting mods. Intake manifold, I said, if you're going to be going forced induction, especially like turbo route, then, intake manifold won't really make that huge of a difference. I mean, if you want to, you can go with like a 70 middle throttle body with like a Skunk 2 intake manifold and stuff like that that if you want to get crazy. That definitely won't be a detriment, but I don't know how much of an extra help it would be. And other than that, that's pretty much on top of my head. I mean, at this point too, also you'd probably be running a lighter, as I said, lightweight tires. At this point, more likely slicks, depends on your class. Maybe even running a different fuel, running exotic fuel, or maybe like E85, water methanol injection if you want to, or 100 octane or more. Just things to consider. And that's all I can think of on that one. I'm probably missing a couple stuff, but just some things to think about. Oh, maybe even like go on coil on plug. That's one thing I forgot. There have been members I've gone COP, also coil on plug on this. Even at this point too, if you're going to be doing full on race car, even consider now going to like Honda, just because like Honda has like extra options. If you want to go above Honda, there's other stuff out there too. I'm not going to recommend any because I'm not really too knowledgeable in that kind of stuff for like, for example, like some AEM stuff or even like Motul, for example. So don't quote me on those. I'm not knowledgeable in that stuff, but I know Honda has worked out for many different applications. So that's something I would stick with for like, if I was going to spend big money on like EC, like, you know, on like standalone ECU systems. All right, so I'm going to close this video out with this. If you were planning on wanting to really swap this, you know, swap an engine in this car, and everything I told you and everything you've done your research on the A20 and seeing its potential, and you still don't want anything to do with it, that's cool. I respect that. If you want to do a swap and you don't know what to do, I'm going to tell you right now, the easiest swap to do in this chassis is a B series. Innovative B series mounts, B series engine, obviously, cable B series transmission, you know, and then, you know, OBD1 conversion, and then the ECU. That's going to be easy. If you did the OBD1 conversion already, then that's just one step already, you know, taken care of. Now you just need to get, you know, figure out a harness, and you're good to go. Now, that being said, this is my opinion. I'm sure there's going to be some debate in the comments below about this. Like, I'm sure of it, and that's fine. Now, look, I'm going to say, before I say this, I'm going to say this. I do not hate or choose any other engine, Honda engine in particular, one over the other. I've seen every single one do work. You know, I've seen the times they've laid out. I've seen the powers they've laid out on each of them. They're all more than capable engines, depending on what you are, you know, what your desire is for out of them. If you were going to swap an engine in this Accord chassis, the car is over 30 years old at this point. If you want to keep it any longer and you want to throw a newer platform in it, I highly suggest doing a K-Series swap. Now, is it going to be easy in the beginning? No. Is it going to be cheap? No. However, that being said, K-Series in general have gotten cheaper, you know, as time went on. They, you know, and this is what I'm going to say. If you got a base K20A3, it will put down as about, if not more power than a high comp B20. Like hands down. And I know everyone's like, oh, but the K20A3 is just basic. It's not even real. It's an Eco VTEC. Well, if you've done your research on that, there are ways of making a K20A3 capable of putting out K20A2 numbers, if not higher. And in fact, I actually recommend going K24A4, the Element K24A4. This isn't a K-Series video, so I'm not gonna get too in depth with that. But if you've done your research on the reasons why I recommend on doing that, you'll figure out real quick. And if you look at the prices on that, you can find K20A3s. You can go to a junkyard, probably pick one up for like $300-400, maybe $400-500 max. You know, nobody wants those things. K24A4s, you know, I've seen some go for like $600-700, like sub $1,000 for engines that put out about, if not more power than a high comp B20 and more torque. You know, I get it, the hardest part is going to be figure out mounts, figure out the axles, and then the wiring. And then I get it, the hardest part about K-Series is going to be the immobilizer in the ECUs. And yeah, tuning capabilities of K-Series is not going to be like you know, tuning it on like Chrome or Neptune. You really can't. Your options there are limited. Like Honda K Pro, it's pretty much the only option. That's about like $600 in itself. But, you know, in stock form, you can still get some good stuff out of it with stock K-Series parts. I'm not going to get into details with it, but do your research into that. In the long run, this is what overall I'm trying to say. I can see higher chances of more aftermarket and OEM support for the K-Series in the next decade than I do for the B-Series. Now, seeing what's been happening to the D-Series with the discontinued oil pumps making for D-Series, I wouldn't doubt that kind of stuff starts happening on B-Series, believe it or not. I really don't start doubting that. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully none of that stuff happens to the B-Series or any other engine platform for that matter, but just some food for thought. Yeah, is it going to suck and, you know, a lot of time and research and a lot of money down now? Yeah, how much is it worth it for you? But you swap in a K-Series and an Accord, that's saying something in this third generation Accord. That is saying something. Not only that, it's also going to be saying something in the next decade, because now you have a really good platform and you're able to keep this thing alive a lot longer than you would for like an A series or a D series or B series around that time. Again, this is all an opinion. These are all guesses, but just something to keep in mind. So guys, I know this is a very debatable video, but I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next one.